U.S. President-elect Donald Trump begins to shape his administration. Will he seek retribution against his adversaries? Meanwhile, progressives reflect on losing the White House. The United States and Germany launched a $40 million joint initiative in West Africa focusing on counterterrorism and extremism. Kenya's national airline is recovering diesel from waste plastics. It's aimed at providing cheaper fuel and reducing plastic waste pollution. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is beginning to shape his administration. Media reports says he will nominate Republican Representative from New York, Elise Stefanik, for the role of ambassador to the United Nations. Meanwhile, progressives are reflecting on losing the White House. VOA Veronica Balderas Iglesias has more.
After a decisive electoral victory, all eyes are now on President-elect Donald Trump and how he will govern. His supporters believe that even those Americans who didn't vote for the former president will see their lives improve.
I think a lot of people across the country, even who have bought into, I think, some false narratives about Donald Trump, are going to be pleasantly surprised as to finding more money in their paycheck, prices coming down in the country, a secure border.
With the selection of Susie Wiles as Trump's chief of staff, the president-elect's administration is already taking shape. The former president took to his Truth social media platform Saturday to make clear, however, that neither former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, nor Trump's former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, will be invited to join his cabinet this time around. Meanwhile, questions have been raised about whether Trump will act on promises he's made to seek revenge against his political enemies and those who have pursued legal cases against him.
I'm going to tell you what Donald Trump has said on this time and again. Success will be our retribution. Success will be our vengeance.
While I concede...
For those who supported the Democratic presidential campaign of Vice President Kamala Harris, this is a time of reflection.
The working class of this country is angry, and they have a reason to be angry. We are living in an economy today, Donna, where the people on top are doing phenomenally well, while 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck.
While praising the Biden administration's achievements, Senator Sanders said there's more work to be done.
We need an agenda that says to the working class, we're going to take on these powerful special interests and create an economy and a government that works for you. And by the way, that can't happen unless you get big money out of politics.
U.S. President Joe Biden has promised there will be a peaceful transfer of power on January 20th. Biden called Trump to congratulate him after his election win, and the two are scheduled to meet in person Wednesday at the White House. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
With former President Donald Trump returning to the White House, Ukrainians are bracing for potential shifts in U.S. policies that could reshape its fight for survival against Russian aggression. President-elect Trump's agenda could take a sharp turn from Biden's administration's unwavering support, raising fears that vital U.S. aid might be at risk. Miroslava Gongazet reports from Europe.
When news about Donald Trump's presidential victory reached Ukraine, the Trump Cafe bar in downtown Kyiv offered free drinks to its customers. Roman Kravtsov, the creative director of the 5-year-old business, is happy with America's choice for president.
We think that's one of the greatest parts of history. It's beginning now, and we think that's great.
But not all Ukrainians share his excitement. Some are bracing for changes in U.S. policy. Mark Weiger, senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis, voices a common concern.
Trump might actually decide to put pressure on Ukraine by withholding the much-needed military, financial, diplomatic, political, and other types of support, that he can show it to his supporters as some sort of a peace.
Werger says Russia would use the opportunity to rest, regroup, and attack again later. He says Trump's promise to end the war suggests he may push Ukraine and Russia to the negotiating table.
The only way Trump could potentially stop the war is, unfortunately, if he puts pressure on Ukraine to stop the fighting and to accept a ceasefire and to also concede and give away the occupied territories under Russia's terms.
Former Ukrainian infrastructure minister turned soldier Volodymyr Omelyan views Trump's intentions as sincere but unrealistic.
I think that Trump is honest in his statement that he will end all wars. I would like only to wish him luck, because if he does so, he will be the first man for centuries to complete this task.
For Ukraine, any peace deal must respect its sovereignty without Russian troops on its soil, experts say. Some Ukrainians say a push for peace could also bring new opportunities for US-Ukraine cooperation.
It's important to lift restrictions on deep strikes and provide Ukraine long-range missiles, especially after the North Korean troops which already supporting Russian aggression against us. And of course, we do believe that more pragmatic approach, especially cooperation in economy.
Ukrainians are balancing their hope for peace with the risk that a rushed deal could jeopardize their sovereignty. Miroslava Gongadze, VOA News, Warsaw.
Qatar is pausing ceasefire negotiations between Israel and Hamas, citing unwillingness and unseriousness from the warring parties. Meanwhile, Israel is ramping up its strikes against Hamas targets in Gaza and Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. VOA Arash Arabasadi reports, "We warn you that some of the images are disturbing."
A helicopter above, an explosion below. In the courtyard of the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in the central Gaza Strip, Israel continues its war campaign against Hamas targets in the region. Local authorities say at least 3 died in this attack, while in the city of Khan Yunis, Palestinian medical officials said at least 13 people died in Israeli airstrikes early Saturday. An Associated Press journalist at the Nasser hospital counted the bodies. The ongoing violence prompted Qatari officials who serve as key mediators between Israel and Hamas to announce a pause in efforts to broker a ceasefire deal. In a statement on social media, Qatar's foreign ministry said efforts to broker such a deal would resume when Israel and Hamas showed their willingness and seriousness to end the war. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Israel, thousands of demonstrators returned to the streets demanding their government reach a ceasefire with Hamas to free hostages still held more than 13 months since the October 7 terror attacks on Israel that triggered the conflict.
We have to have the voice of the people. I'm here today because the situation is terrible. It's been 400 days and the hostages are still in Gaza. There's a war without a direction. It's so sad. It's a big tragedy, and the government has to listen to the people. This is our way of protesting.
While simultaneously attacking targets in Gaza, Israel also launched strikes into parts of its northern neighbor, Lebanon. Israel says it's targeting members of the Iran-backed Western-identified terror group Hezbollah. With scenes similar to Gaza, parts of Lebanon are now dust and rubble, twisted metal, with rescuers digging through rocks using their bare hands. Lebanese officials say dozens died in the attacks, with some needing DNA testing to identify their remains. More protests and strikes come against the backdrop of violence in Amsterdam. Dutch officials said young people there attacked Israeli fans after a soccer match. Authorities said social media posts called for targeting Jews, and they shut down all demonstrations for the weekend. Reports say some of the Israeli fans had torn a Palestinian flag off a building and chanted anti-Arab slogans on their way to the stadium. Arash Erbasadi, VOA News.
Thanks, Arashia. The United States and Germany are launching a $40 million joint initiative, the Coastal State Stability Mechanism, across 5 West African states, focusing on counterterrorism and extremism. Unlike past military-driven efforts, this program emphasizes community-led developmental approach to addressing the root cause of instability and promote good governance and economic development. Senanu Tord report from Yendi, Ghana.
At Yendi in northern Ghana, US and German delegates handed over police equipment to local leaders to mark the launch of a new initiative to protect communities from the growing threat of terrorism and extremism spilling over from the Sahel. The Coastal State Stability Mechanism, or CSSM, focuses on tackling the root causes of regional instability through community-led solutions, improved governance, and economic development, marking a shift away from the traditional military approach to conflict resolution. Before its launch, the program supported vulnerable communities by improving healthcare facilities, providing solar energy, and enhancing community leadership programs.
One might think just about security services for building security, but security is about more than that. It's about the whole community. It's about building resilient societies. And yes, of course, it is about the ability of the police to conduct their work and to do it in a way that, that has the trust of the community, but it's about these other pieces as well. Experts say violent extremists often exploit developmental gaps to radicalize communities. Ghana's National Security Interagency Coordinator, Baba Sayuti, explains that the CSSM partnership strengthens the nation's capacity to address these gaps and prevent terrorism.
So for us partnering with CSM, Coastal State Stability Mechanism, to be able to provide the needs whereby the state is not able to do it, it's a way in order to reduce this kind of thing. That's why I'm saying that they are helping the first pillar, that is the prevention.
Despite these efforts, Ghana's Northeast Regional Minister, Yidana Zakaria, warns of visible signs of terrorist activity. Zakaria explained to delegates that northern Ghana's proximity to the Sahel makes it easy for suspicious individuals to enter the country under the guise of religious clerics or refugees seeking aid.
They come and go. Sometimes you don't even know where they stay. And we are worried about that. They are not necessarily beggars. They could also be gathering intelligence. The question is, how do they even get into the country? Because they don't have any document to show that they have come through approved entry points. That gives room for worry.
In Accra, the US and German ambassadors reassured local leaders of their commitment to using existing development programs, such as Germany's GIZ and the US Agency for International Development, to help build community resilience against these threats. They also indicated that more partners would soon join the CSSM initiative.
You can expect more partners to join the program, and that certainly is our goal. We're better when we're together. Each of us brings a certain set of experiences, types of resources to the table.
For the next 3 years, CSSM will operate in 5 coastal West African states: Benin, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Guinea, and Togo, in an effort to help defend these countries from the Sahel insurgencies. Sana Nutod, VOA News, Yendi, Ghana.
Diplomats from across the world are in Azerbaijan capital Baku Monday for the annual climate summit known as COP29 to discuss how to avoid the increasing threat from climate change in a place that was one of the birthplace of the oil industry. Azerbaijan under fire from multiple organizations that allege its commitment to the green energy transition amounts to greenwashing or making false or misleading statements about the environmental benefits of a product or practice. Azerbaijani officials argued that it's unfair to criticize Baku for producing more fossil fuel when there is a demand for them across Europe as governments try to keep fuel costs low. Many Nigerians are objecting to a bill that would create an armed unit for the Federal Road Safety Corps. The Corps says the bill, if passed, would ensure the security of its facilities and officers and that members of the squad will not be deployed on traffic patrols. But rights activists are calling for the bill to be rejected, saying it could lead to intimidation, extortion, and brutality. Timothy Obuezu have details from Lagos.
3 years ago, Okpeyemi Folarin was on his way to a wedding ceremony in Abuja when road safety officials stopped his vehicle for a routine check. He says despite presenting all the required documents, the officers accused him of frowning and not cooperating enough. They held him for hours on the highway, forcing him to miss the ceremony.
I wasn't comfortable with them, ensuring that we waste so much time. In the thick of the forest, and this is a place not even close to where people are moving from one point to another. So it keeps me cause worried.
Practices like intimidation, bribery, and extortion by road safety officials are sadly common in Nigeria. The FRSC says it is trying to fix the problem and to hold corrupt agents accountable, but says officials also suffer assault and aggression by road users while on duty. This month, Nigeria's House of Representatives approved a bill allowing the FRSC to create an armed squad.
This arm we're talking about, even if the bill is passed, is not for our men to take to the road. It's to guard our facilities and, of course, maybe some of our senior officers. So it's not that they will use it for enforcement or take it on patrol.
But many, like human rights activist Abiodun Thomas, disagree.
Already they are aggressive, but immediately they start carrying ammunitions, they become excessively aggressive. Even policemen, when you look at the ones that are with weapons, they are usually power intoxicated. And do not forget that some of these people might not be mentally stable.
Thomas was recently beaten and arrested by police while participating in a procession at the Lekki toll gate in Lagos to remember the brutal shooting of protesters there by Nigerian security forces 4 years ago. For years, Nigerian security forces have been embroiled in allegations of abuse and excessive use of force. Hamzat of the FRSC has this to say.
Brutality is individualistic. Don't forget, recruitment is done from members of the public. By the virtue of training, everybody is blended to do some things. So among those trainees, some would abide in toto, some would misbehave.
There is also a growing concern over the proliferation of illegal firearms among non-state actors. This week, during an arms destruction exercise, the National Security Office said many of the illicit weapons often used by terrorists and bandits originally belonged to officials. The firearms bill still needs approval from the Senate and President Bola Tinubu to become law. Timothy Obuezu, VOA News, Lagos, Nigeria.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, Kenya's national airline aims to provide cheaper fuel while reducing plastic waste pollution. We'll be right back.
Health, wellness, sport, beauty, medical breakthroughs. Healthy Living cares about your well-being. What are the main health concerns in Africa and around the world? Find out the latest on coronavirus. Connect with our experts and ask them questions.
How long does the virus stay?
Join me, Linor Mudu, in Washington every week on Healthy Living, right here on VOA.
In times of change, when the world seems uncertain and what we hear doesn't reflect what we see, we seek the truth. When we are told only part of the story, we lose trust. In moments of crisis, our dreams, hopes, and wishes for a better tomorrow depends on a free press. At Voice of America, we bring you the stories that people take risks to see. We connect the world and unite it with truth. At Voice of America, we show you the whole picture.
In other news, the Chadian army says Boko Haram insurgents killed 17 Chadian soldiers in a weekend attack on a military post that also left 96 of the assailants dead in the country's west. The attack on the Lake Chad region happened on Saturday, according to Army spokesperson who did not provide details. The World Health Organization, in a statement on Monday, says it is calling a meeting of its emergency committee on the November 22nd to determine whether Mpox remains a global health crisis. In August, the disease, which continues to spread in Africa, was classified by the UN health body as a public health emergency of international concern, which represents the highest form of alert. And the incumbent Prime Minister of Mauritius, Pravandi Jugnauth, says his political alliance appears headed for a major defeat to a rival coalition led by three-time former premier following Sunday's parliamentary elections. Jugnauth says the alliance, headed by 77-year-old veteran politician Navin Ramgoolam, is poised to win the vote on the Indian Ocean archipelago. The United States rates the missing and murdered Native American women are higher than the national average. The Department of the Interior says American Indian and Alaska Native people are at disproportionately at risk of going missing, experiencing violence, or being murdered in the southern states of New Mexico. Some indigenous families are using a new grant to help expand their search for justice. Gustavo Martinez Contreras has our story.
Tiffany Reed went missing from the Navajo Nation 20 years ago. Today, her older sister Deandra Reed is helping other families of missing and murdered Indigenous people try to find closure and justice. Reed is a coordinator with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women.
This is personal for me, and it really gave me the motivation to be the voice for my sister. And I just really want to be able to help the families who are just now experiencing the loss of their loved one, and just trying to help them to navigate the system to get through the barriers that we faced 20 years ago.
New Mexico has among the largest number of missing and murdered Indigenous people, with some cases dating back to the 1950s. Reed's group is helping connect Indigenous people who are looking for a missed loved one with a state program offering up to $3,000 to cover search-related expenses. 17 families used that direct aid fund last year, including Navajo Nation member Denise Carrillo, who is searching for her sister Christina, who was last seen on June 14, 2022.
It takes a lot of money, and a lot of families have been doing that, been out of their own pocket paying for cadaver dogs and paying for volunteers, paying for people to go and help do these large searches where they have 5 canine dogs out there, and we're like circling and flagging any type of bone or stuff like that.
Josette Monet is Cabinet Secretary for the New Mexico Indian Affairs Department. She says helping defray families' search costs is progress, but the state still needs to figure out better ways to help them.
Hearing the family stories, for me, it comes back to me as, for my professional role, to come back and say, okay, I need to understand some of these questions, or I need to start trying to find some answers to these questions so that I can help better serve the families and the communities. But there's some things that I just don't know the answers to right now, and I think that that's what's really hard for families, it's hard for us as well.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that non-Hispanic American Indians and Alaska Natives had the second highest rates of homicide in 2020 compared to all other racial and ethnic groups. Gustavo Martinez Contreras, VOA News, Farmington, New Mexico.
Kenya's national airline is recovering diesel from waste plastics. Authorities says the goal is to provide cheaper fuel and to reduce plastic waste pollution. Victoria Amunga explains from Nairobi.
Uncontrolled disposal of plastics in Kenya often increases pollution and waste in the environment. Most of this plastic ends up in landfills. However, this month, National Airline Kenya Airways launched a project to turn plastics to fuel. The plastics are shredded and loaded into this hopper. Heat breaks the plastics down into oil, which is refined into diesel fuel for ground vehicles. The company's chief operating officer, George Kamal, says at least 1,000 liters of fuel is produced daily.
We get people to work here in the plant, and we get people to work in the community to collect that plastic from the community and pays money as well for the community. So we take that waste plastic from the community around and we use that. So 98% comes from the community around us. 2% comes from the airline.
Scientists say the diesel produced from plastic waste is less efficient than regular fuel, produces higher exhaust emissions and has lower flash point, meaning it catches on fire more easily. At the same time, oil supplies and prices are chronically uncertain, and Kenya barely produces any crude oil. So experts say creating fuel alternatives is crucial.
You begin to change people to renewable energy, and then also cut the dependency on fuel, on the traditional hydrocarbon fuels. And the earlier you do it, the better it will be for the country.
Also, plastic pollution remains a significant problem in Kenya, despite recent national commitments to increase recycling. An estimated 92% of Kenya's plastic is mismanaged and only 7% is recycled, according to a recent report.
We do use the plastics, that is in terms of bottles and other like trays and such like things. So when they break, we would be forced to dispose them. But now with the plant, we are able to bring them back here and recycle the same to produce diesel.
The diesel production plant was designed by Kenyan engineers and is the first of its kind in the country. Kenya Airways officials say producing fuel locally is saving costs and reducing plastic waste. Victoria Amunga, VOA News, Nairobi.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.